My name is Safia Habijam and I study in JNV Kohima Avanti COE and I'm currently in 11th standard.
Who is your biggest ally and why?
First, people who come to my mind are my classmates right now, and then my Avanti teachers, and then my parents. In my opinion, ally is anybody who helps us in the time of distress and is always with us. And my classmates, my teachers, and my parents, they all fulfill all these things.
I'm Akshay Saxena, co-CEO and co-founder of Avanti Fellows, and I will be one of your hosts for this season. When we talk about success, we often talk about the importance of hard work and perseverance. But success is rarely achieved without the support of those around you. So for season 2, we will talk about allyship. I'll be joining as co-host with my co-CEO and ally Vandana Goyal, and we will be talking to women about their success and the men that have supported them along the way. Welcome to season 2 of the Avanti Yes She Can podcast. Our guests today know a thing or two about the importance of allyship in the workplace. In fact, they're allies to each other, at work and outside of work. Parmesh Shahani is the head of the Godrej DEI Lab, also the award-winning author of Queeristan. Supriya Nair is firstly my friend and my tutor in allyship for many years. She's a journalist, editor, and heads research and media at the Godrej DEI Lab and the Godrej Foundation. Welcome. All right, so should we start with you, Supriya?
If you must.
The biggest ally, the first time you actually recognized someone as an ally for you?
Well, I'm not just saying it because he's in the room, but his name is Parmesh Shahani. This goes back to the fact that Parmesh was one of my earliest bosses and my first boss in journalism. I wasn't fresh out of college, but as good as. And I kind of stumbled into this job and very much took a chance on it, as Parmesh took a chance on me. And we kind of grew together. And I think many of the good things we did in that job, we were able to do in each other's company. And I was able to do under his leadership. You know, you also gave me one of the best gifts of my life without knowing.
I don't remember.
Parmesh was the first gay man I had met who became close to me. Like apart from college acquaintances and friends, someone who became a part of my daily life, you were that person. And I remember telling my wonderful, very educated, very liberal mother, with whom nonetheless I had never had a conscious conversation about queerness, that my boss at work, is a wonderful guy and I'm having so much fun, and then I brought up the fact that he's gay. And I still remember the expression on her face because it was complex and it was difficult to describe. But, she looked in that moment the way mothers look when they're like getting up to fight for their kids. And she said, Acha, so what is there? Some people are like that. God wants them to be that way. And I was like, okay, no argument. But that I admired her so much in that instance. I don't think she had ever had a queer friend in her life, but like her instinctive thing, the first thing she did when she heard about you and who you are was to stand up for you.
Yeah, which is allyship in its purest sense.
And so, you gave me that like really lovely memory of my mother.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
And Parmesh, you wrote an entire book about this.
Yeah.
But, and in the book you describe redefining for yourself and rediscovering for yourself what allyship meant in its many forms.
Yeah.
But maybe talk a little bit to the first time you felt genuinely supported as a gay man.
So many ways. With my parents, it was amazing since we're on Mother Stories. When I came out to my mom, I told my mom, I think I'm gay. So then my mom said, do you think or are you sure? Then I said, okay, I'm sure I'm gay. And her answer was, okay, what should we have for dinner? And that kind of, normalizing it without drama, although I love drama. So I had made a whole list of, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this. And then I was like, that's it. But that's it's a wonderful form of allyship as well. And that deflation of, okay, there's going to be no drama. It's so normal. It's so okay. All the way up to bosses. One of my early bosses happens to be Priya Ramani, the journalist, when she was editing Elle at that time. I was I was gay, but I wasn't out. I think everyone knew except they were just all waiting ki one day this one will come out. And so she very sweetly said, I want you. She assigned me a story to cover in Bombay's LGBT scene. And I was like, why do you want to give it to me? And she said, I think you'll be good at writing it, But that itself was a form of allyship because that enabled me to go and cover a scene and in a sense discover myself without stating the obvious, right? I mean, I've had some incredible bosses, Bachi Karkaria, the Times of India. This was in phase 1 of my life when I was a writer and journalist. All the way up to a professor like Henry Jenkins, who was the head of comparative media studies at MIT, where I did my master's program. Biggest ally in helping me write my first book, Gay Bombay, both in terms of format, in terms of making me feel very okay that the peculiar, I was attempting to write a memoir, almost an auto-anthropological book, auto-ethnographic, very complicated in terms of research and putting bits of my life in, interjecting it in a very strange and peculiar way, which until then hadn't been written about in academia. One of the biggest allies saying your life experiences are valid. I want to read about, your thoughts, your dreams, your this, as much as I want to read about the research that you're doing as well, right? To the vice president at that time of MIT, who when I was doing a South Asian LGBTQ film festival, called me to her office and said, I know you're a new student. I believe you're doing this. Here's I think $10,000 from a discretionary fund for you to help organize it. Right? She didn't know me. She just heard that there was this grad student who's doing this. So many amazing forms of allyship that I've received at Godrej, where we work. Nisa Godrej, our boss, is one of the biggest allies. I mean, at Avanti because a lot of the work that you do has been possible because of that vision and that allyship. So I've just been very blessed in receiving these gifts of people who may not always understand where you're going and what you're doing, but they take a bet on you, they believe, and then they don't just give you that verbal or moral support. They give you actual stuff. They give you money. They give you resources. They help you succeed. So I've been really blessed. And I think it's also informed how I think of, my role in this world in terms of taking all these blessings and then figuring out what to do with them in terms of leaving the world a little better.
And I feel like these relationships that we have with people, which are really bonds of mutual service, both at work and outside, are really the thing that helps us make our own luck. Which is a pretty wonderful phrase. And that's not, you're right. Everything about that depends so much on the moment you're in, your social location, the people you're surrounded by. And we have both, I think, been very fortunate in that. Yeah. But the love with which you approach others and the respect that you give their work, I think the real luck is in being able to get some of that back. And that's what really materially forms these alliances, these networks of allyship, that we're lucky to have at Godrej in the world.
And that's kind of where I was going, because I think at least in reading through Queeristan, knowing Supriya's life through the years, I think there is a lot that you both put into others. But I think there is a certain way in which both of you, in your own ways, have approached life, right? And it did seem to me, at least thinking about this a little bit, that it's been a very virtuous cycle of giving, getting, and then giving more. The intent to be an ally leads people to hold you up because they feel like you're going to support others, if not them. Yeah. And that in many ways, I feel for both of you has been like a compounding journey to your jobs today. But talk maybe about this, your sense of that. Do you agree, disagree?
Akshay, women like me who read and write and publish and are journalists or are in the media, in India today is almost entirely composed of a population of people who were brought up to think that they were going to be wives and mothers who maybe had jobs. And I think all of us thought like that. And we were lucky to have managers in the workplace, but also colleagues who not only said yes to opportunities and who pushed us to do better. And the obverse of that was also just that we were in this unique historical moment for Indian women where we managed to also say no to things. And I think that became like a really important component of how we built on some of this success, none of which can be taken for granted. We are still waiting for women to become the managers that we know that they can be. We're still waiting for queer people to be given the opportunity to do that, for people with disabilities to be able to enter the buildings where they can be, the directors and the business owners and the creators that we so badly need.
Parmesh, maybe before we get deeper into this, what is the Godrej DEI Lab and what are its goals?
DEI stands for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. It's a term which has increasingly been used over the past 20 years. It's been adopted more and more by organizations, whether corporations, whether governments, whether civil society organizations, in schools, colleges, people at large, to stand for a large amount of work that goes around in helping create a more inclusive world. Diversity stands for representation. So how many women are there in your organization, for example? How many persons with disabilities? How many you identify as LGBTQ+? So diversity is more a number. Inclusion stands for how people feel. So it's about belongingness. It's about, yes, you have so many women in your organization, but are they feeling good? E stands for equity, which is what are the structural barriers you can remove and what are the structural impetuses you can give to help people advance in that sense, right? So under this broad rubric, there are a lot of activities that are happening in various organizations all around the world. At Godrej, we work with 3 broad cohorts, which I've said women, persons with disabilities, and LGBTQIA+, although these intersect with so many other aspects of people's identities. We all have multiple dimensions. And we work also, unlike other organizations, most companies think of DEI as something that sits in HR, and it's only about the diversity. It's only about that number and representation, whereas we focus a lot on all the other aspects. So for us, it is about, of course, it is about increasing the number of women, persons with disabilities, LGBTQ, and I'm very happy that, we have 28% women. We have over the years, now we have about 400 persons with disabilities who are comfortable sharing this with the organization. We have about 400 LGBTQIA+ people. One of it is that, how do we create, again, policies, processes, systems, structures, trainings, benefits, and so on, nudges, like with leaders, with so many things, which is what we do. But what we do in addition to that, and very different from other organizations, that we serve as a very important amplifier of DI efforts in India and around the world. So we have a research and media wing that Supriya leads, which is in working with some of the best institutions, other organizations. We do podcasts, we do videos, we have a newsletter, we are present at public events, we do collaborative events on our own campus, and we've really taken on the mandate of making the world like super excited about being inclusive, because we fundamentally believe that when your school, college, company, state government, national government, society is more inclusive, everyone wins. So that's what we do at our lab. It's called a lab because we have experiments. We run many experiments all around, some of which succeed and some of which are learnings for future. And we have fun. We're like, think of us in lab coats as scientists trying to helping create a better world.
Maybe Supriya, picking up on that, the journey from journalism to more journalism,
to even more journalism,
to entrepreneurship, to working in inclusion. How much of your own journey into this path, and I think in some ways the acceptance of these transitions was aided by allies, and what led you to wanting to do what you do now?
One, making that sideways switch from journalism to inclusion. There's the obvious connection, which is shared values, a shared sense of what you want India's future to look like. And it helped that the person to pull me across industries happened to be Parmesh. But to come back to the question of why inclusion in particular, to me, that is really inseparable from the fact that it's inclusion at Godrej. There is an element of mutual trust, respect, equity, and fairness. And the idea is these are the tools that you have to figure out the challenges in front of you. And that seemed to make the most sense to me as someone who's worked in journalism.
It's a strange mashup of a corporate department which oversees very specifically how inclusion is done based on certain mandates, but also a research space, a public advocacy space, a publishing empire that we're trying to create. And I couldn't think of anyone else actually who could co-create it alongside, who had, these various abilities to make all of those things happen. I was very lucky. When I reached out to her, I had hoped very much that she would say yes. So I think, again, luck. It just so happened that, I made the call at that right moment. And I hope she doesn't regret it.
How lucky for that moment to connect with this particular moment at Godrej itself, right?
And now I can tell you that it's been 2 years, about close to 2 years.
Soon enough.
And we're in the middle of reimagining the entire Godrej Industries group after about 128 years. So it's quite amazing because to bring that rigor of, say, so many years of, whether it's, Caravan, whether it's 52, that kind of depth and rigor to pursuing a story to help create what inclusion looks like, not just for us, but, literally what we do. A lot of people in corporate India and now increasing the world emulate.
And getting to that place, Parmesh, for you has been so much about using the power of narrative and stories. And you talk about it in your book. I think it's been a big part of the Culture Lab, which then turned into the DEI Lab, which is not common. Right, which is to kind of take the power of like personal stories, individual stories, build connections, build bridges, and building allyship over time. But maybe talk a little bit about, I know you guys said you're at this moment, but it took a lot to get to this moment.
I think running the Culture Lab as a catalyst, which is what I did for 10 years, enabled certainly senior leadership in the company to understand the power of ideas when they come outside in. I mean, with the Culture Lab, we kind of played with many ideas. We played with the idea of adaptive reuse, say for buildings, because we said, what if a cultural space is not like a standalone thing like NCPA or this or that, right? We said, what if your own offices and factories after work become a cultural alternative space for the city? So we played with format, we played with concepts. We did pop-up museums which disappeared in 3 days, but which had after effects of years. We ran fellowship programs. We produced white papers. We made apps for the city. We were just playing with, and also while playing, making Godrej a destination for interesting ideas, people, etc., from the not-profit world, from the creative industries, from business, of course, from policy, etc. And over 10 years, that kind of placemaking made our campus and Vikhroli, and I would argue Mumbai as well, a much more interesting space. So that was one. The second thing is, it just so happened that in parallel with us running this Culture Lab experiment, a lot of the patterns in the conversations that began to emerge over 10 years were around ideas of equity. Because we were an open space, we were some of the early adopters. A lot of the work that we did, say, with LGBTQIA+, policy making led to other companies do it, because through the Culture Lab, we released reports like, a transgender manifesto. We collaborated with groups like the UN. And so de facto, Godrej was being recognized as a pioneer in the inclusion space. And so it seemed to me quite natural that when the COVID rupture happened, to use that moment to take a pause and say, maybe a 10-year Culture Lab experiment has been great, but maybe what the next 10-year experiment needs to be is to focus around inclusion. It's clear that the world needs everyone to be thinking around this in the same way that you need to be thinking about environment, sustainability, climate change, and so on, because sabka saath, sabka vikas, but who is the sabka? It cannot be straight, able-bodied men in India and all around the world, right? Yeah. So in a post-COVID, reimagined, better world, how are we going to take more and more people across? And so the DEI Lab happened over many conversations, Nisa and me, imagining what this future lab-like space would be, in which we can run a lot of these experiments at Godrej with our own employees, with our own leaders. We can try things like, what if we mandate that every senior leader puts 15% on their goal sheet towards inclusion? You know what? Women go up by 6% in the organization. So now...
In 1 year.
So now we're like, other companies should be mandating this too, right? We've been doing such incredible work in terms of policies, processes, these experiments, and so on. And we've been sharing it with other people through our publications and so on, because we believe that we can be an interesting space to try out these things. But really, the magic will come when other organizations do the same. So we've been very blessed. We've been advising the Prime Minister's chief scientific, advisor on how do we increase women in STEM. We've been talking to other companies. We were recently at Purple Fest in Goa, where there are incredible not-for-profits, corporations, the state government, all thinking about what would a more accessible India look like in terms of infra, whatever.
As you were speaking and that story of the Culture Lab, the thing you can draw from that is that this approach to allyship, both to being an ally and receiving allyship, is so rooted for Parmesh in looking at the ecosystem and not just at one dimension or one vertical or one company. To step back and have the space and say, how do we bring the world in to get excited about what we are doing? And how can that make our case stronger at the heart of the experiment?
So Supriya, with now 2 years under your belt, to make inclusion for women, both cis and trans, better, more meaningful, to make culture more accepting. In these 2 years of running experiments, what in your mind pops up?
I think it's both the easiest and the hardest thing to say that the I part of DEI, which is inclusion, is fundamental. Women will turn up and do the jobs that they are sure to excel at if they know that there's a bathroom at the factory where they're eventually going to end up being line supervisors. But I also think that equity and representation, which seem like they should be the easy things to analyze on paper because you can put numbers to them, are also the places where organizations, maybe less mature organizations like, Godrej and other companies, but certainly smaller organizations, need a bit of that elbow to the solar plexus. We cannot still be having a debate about my organization being too small to give 6 months of maternity leave to a woman. If you are running a business, just as you have 8 months salary in the bank to pay your employees, regardless of what happens to your inflows. A second, possibly more nebulous, but equally important thing is to have people who do not come with the assumed power and potential power that cis, non-disabled men enter workplaces with, needs some networking, some sense of seeing and acknowledging each other, some sense of building on solutions to common problems. And that means that groups of women who manage to get together, talk across to people with disabilities who are facing the same challenges as salespeople out in the field. But I do think that intersectionality, which is a big word in cultural spaces and is perhaps only in a slower way entering business, is a very useful and very powerful tool for us simply to address the truth of the challenges that we face and the solutions that we want to find for them.
Parmesh, I think one of the ways in which you framed it in the past is thinking of inclusion as truly being inclusive. So like if you do it for women, you do it for trans women. If you do it for trans women, you do it for LGBTQ. Yeah. Talk a little bit about just that framing, because I do think it's helpful, right, to not make different parts of the communities we want to include compete with each other. They really aren't. It is intersectional. Yeah.
So beyond it being intersectional, because all of these are like various facets of us, it also has to be comprehensive. So it has to be for everyone, because we're all part of this, right? I mean, even from a population basis, women are still around 50%, but we don't see 50% in workplaces. And that's not because they're not able or willing or talented. That's because of structural barriers, right? Likewise, with persons with disabilities, based on other parts of the world and our own, it's about 6 to 10%. LGBTQ people are 5 to 10% of any population, and based on 100 years of research all over the world as well, right? But we're not seeing that in workplaces as well. If all of that enters this space, imagine how much better we'll grow. Imagine how much more innovative we'll become. Imagine how much more we have a chance at succeeding at solving some of our most pressing problems than if you're keeping all this talent leashed or whatever, right? In fact, all the data says that you get bumps economic bumps and otherwise, if you are, the more diverse and the more inclusive you are. So one is in pushing that, out there, in the organizations in which we work, telling them it is truly a win-win. If you have 50% women and 10% persons that have been LGBTQ, it's also about then making products to serve various needs, right? And so this is some of the stuff that we've realized since we've gone on our journey, right? We all at some point or the other will have a disability or the other, or we live with aging parents or so on. So can Godrej Properties, a real estate business, equip homes already to be accessible, whether it's like basic tiles that don't let you slip, whether it's grab bars, whether it's basic stuff, right? None of this is rocket science. But because once you have this talent on board, that's when you're able to think about the innovative products and services, which will also make you money. I mean, that's the other thing as well, right? Because these are all untapped markets. No one is thinking of solving housing needs for persons with disabilities. And we're 10% of this country, they also have money to spend, right? LGBTQ people, imagine if someone creates, like, if LGBT marriage becomes equal, I don't think back of envelope calculation, our GDP will go up 2%. Because I think queer people are going to spend way more on their queer marriages than straight marriages. And imagine this whole industry is going to go up. But the reason why we do this is also really, really connected. It is, of course, to get representation, but it is to create a better world and make more money for all of us. So everyone wins, no?
But as you're pushing for inclusion, right, in India especially, and now around the world, there's this whole argument that it flies in the face of meritocracy. How do you at the lab view this?
The idea that inclusion is messing with meritocracy, which is some perfect objective standard of excellence, which you will reach automatically because your father and grandfather reached it, is nonsense. It's rubbish. The idea that you are working with, which is that expanding opportunity so that anyone with potential could be excellent and contribute to the workforce, to society, to their families, to the world, is what success and prosperity should look like.
DEI is not anti-merit. It is just widening the pool of opportunities for everyone who has merit to come forward and show their merit, and removing structural barriers that so many of people who have merit are not able to show their merit to the world because of that. So that's what it is, and that's what we mostly lovingly, but sometimes quite sternly also tell our colleagues as well as others in that, right?
When I think about how life has worked out for me individually as someone in the workforce and as an artist, all I can see is like just streams of support that I've got from my family, from my friends, from colleagues and mentors, and from a lot of people I've worked with who have either by design or by accident just gotten out of the way, which sounds like a negative thing, but which I think a lot of women in our milieu in India really experience as freedom. So my own idea of how to be an ally to some of our younger colleagues, to the people I hope to see succeed, has been to say, how much do you need me? And how much of what you need from me is just for me to get out of your way? One of the things that people take out of the context of allyship is just how much people can lead you by example and how much you can learn from people who aren't consciously holding your hand, but who are showing you what it's possible to do. And I experience both those things really very powerfully as bonds of allyship.
To me, allyship is many things. It is... It's about empathy for sure, but not just plain empathy. It's about empathy accompanied by action. No one will ever understand what it means to be uniquely you in your own position, right? I've tried very hard for so many years. I have no idea what it is to be a straight man. But how do I show allyship in terms of how do I show support? And there's so many ways I've, received this in school, in college, with professors, with people at work. For example, caring about LGBTQ rights can be for so many people saying, I care about you people, I'm an ally. No, what are you doing about it? Your caring is not giving more jobs, is not creating more institutions, is not saving people's lives, is not improving healthcare outcomes or whatever, right? So how you translate that empathy into action to me is a true form of allyship. For me, allyship has 4 S's. It's standing up. It's showing up, it's speaking up, all of which are important, because how do you stand up for something? How do you show up, for example? Do you show up at a pride march, or instead of just supporting it from far? Do you speak up when something is wrong, when someone is being bullied, when unfair practices are happening, or do you keep quiet, right? There's all forms of allyship. And the fourth goes back to what Supriya said, which is how do you then shut up? To me, which is, step back and platform someone else who needs to be platformed in that sense. But all of them link to action.
So if there's someone who's listening to this and decides they want to really make a more meaningful investment in inclusion or in DEI, where would you recommend they start?
There's so much you can do. I would say you can start anywhere, but please be comprehensive. It's a long-term project because it is about, don't locate it in HR, because HR is just one of it. It has to be located with your senior leaders who have to be committed to it over the long term. It is as much about product. It is as much about your CSR. It is as much about your communication, right? Simple things. It's not just how many women do you have, persons in the LGBTQ. Like, what are you doing through your storytelling? What are you doing through advertising? Do you have products that serve all these communities, or your products cater to a different way, right? B, I would say, is please allocate money to it, because this doesn't come, DI professionals are not cheap, and like to build teams of DI professionals it is going to cost you. So the same way as you would spend on a marketing team, the same way as you would spend on an ad campaign, the same way as you would spend on, you won't do finance as a stretch goal. So why would you think of inclusion as something that please invest in it as seriously as you would invest in anything else. Hire great talent, think of the long term. Experiment a lot with things that may succeed and fail. The truth is, demographically or whatever, we're very challenged, right? We know everyone wants to increase more women if you're talking about gender, but there are structural barriers to how many women are being educated, joining the workforce or whatever. So we all have to think about very interesting out-of-the-box ideas on how to do this, right? Everyone should be thinking about that. How can we create? Can we collaborate with universities? Can we create programs? Can we do internships? Can we do fellowships? How do we bring people who we couldn't imagine in a workforce into the workforce? And the fourth is what Supriya said, which is go to our DEI Lab website, because we spent the past few years in actually creating more than 1,000 resources for you. We have a DEI directory that you can use. We have a spotlight section that features so many other companies that you can learn from. We have everything we do, whether our reports, policies, is free for the public. So you don't have to spend all these millions of dollars. We've done it for you. Just come to our website and use some of our resources and plug and play.
So much of what you've said, I think, is really relevant to businesses and to leaders and to people who see that their job is to invest in a future where you can grow and prosper. So I will maybe take the other end of the spectrum and speak to younger people, particularly to people who don't come into the playing field with the advantages of birth and social location. It is really important for you to own the work that you do. Do not lessen that light or feel like you're grinding away at something for somebody else's benefit. The work that you do now when you are 20, 25, 30 is the foundation on which you are going to build and do great things for yourself and for other people like you when you are 35 and 40 and 50. But love what you do and believe that you have as much right to be there as anybody else. The second thing is, I think, to find people like you and to support them as they will support you. That might feel like it's putting you in a silo, but the most successful men in the world are essentially where they are because they have each other's backs. And I think some of the most exciting experiments in the world happen because, people outside that pale find each other, love what the other person does, and says, you know what, I'll back you.
As Supriya was talking, I felt very inspired and this thing welled inside me, so it has to come out. I wanted to tell everyone utopia is not some distant dream. As I write in Queeristan, and this is in the LGBTQ context, but it's in any context in the world that we want, other worlds are possible, but, for us to create them, we have to imagine them first. And what's amazing right now is how much of this imagination is already happening all around us. So if you feel low or despondent, just look at some of the incredible work. Look at the work of, what Avanti is doing with fellowships, right? In the queer space as well, whenever I feel like angry or irritated or whatever, I look at what Saddam is doing in the Northeast with Yaol. I look at what Maya Sharma is doing, say, in Baroda with Vikalp, which is a shelter for lesbian women in Gujarat, but so many other things as well. I look at, the incredible cooperatives and collectives of trans people who have, despite being shunned so often from society, created alternative ways of living, being, financing, and so on. I look at pride marches. I look at accepting parents. I look at workplaces. I look at governments doing consultations. So it's not some distant dream. It is happening. But for it to happen more and faster is our challenge. But please find each other and connect with each other, because that solidarity is going to give you that courage and strength in difficult times.
Avanti's mission is to end poverty in a single generation. We do this by identifying bright, motivated students across India who are passionate about pursuing a career in STEM. Our students come from predominantly rural areas and from families with incomes of less than $5,000 a year. They are likely to be the first in their family to pursue higher education of any kind. Join us as we seek to create a more equitable India. To learn more about the work we do, visit avantifellows.org.